So a few years ago, I was at a startup company and I wasn't happy and figured out that I wanted to work by myself, but I wanted community. I'd bounce back and forth between consulting, staying up all night hacking in my house. It was really cool to work from home, like in my robe, but zero community, zero structure. So co-working was like a means to an end. Like my end was to invent. I said, how can I have the kind of community and the kind of cool people around me that you'd have at a place like Google without having to join Google, without having to join a big company? And I naively assumed that I would just find a space, put an ad on Craigslist, and it would magically fill up. Didn't turn out to be true. It turned out to be a lot more work. I found a space. It was called Spiral Muse. I didn't have a lot of money to invest, so they were really cool. They gave it to us for a couple $100 a month. And we used folding card tables, and we had to break them down, and it was over. The idea for me is forming deep connections with the people that are there. So I exactly wanted to replicate what it's like to work at a cool company. My best friend I met at a company I worked at in New York City. He's still my best friend. And to form those kind of connections. And those are the kind of things you miss out on when you work for yourself.
When I first moved here, I didn't know anybody, so it was often a pretty solitary experience where my only social interaction was through the web. You can never really replace the kind of, real-world interactions that you get from being near people. And after being involved with the Barcamp community and getting geeks together and just having sort of those real in-person social connections, it was like, well, we need something more than this.
When we first started talking about co-working, the way that I saw it and I would describe it to people is it's Barcamp every day. What came out of Barcamp was a lot of people would say, okay, well, why are we getting together once every 6 months or once every year? I love it so much that I want to have it every day. And this is sort of where co-working was born from.
The real reason for co-working is to get people sort of out of their homes, out of the cafes, and into a space that's really community driven, that meets those social needs that I think we all have, as well as creating local communities and local bonds with the people that are your neighbors, but you just don't really know.
I'm not a bar guy. I go to bars and I see lots of people standing around. No one talks to each other, and I don't know why. But when I go to a house party, I go to a party thrown at someone's house. There's lots of people standing around, and yet everyone talks to each other because there's a shared context. I think a coffee shop is similar. Lots of people are in coffee shops talking, not talking really, kind of working. Maybe say hello. So how do you get that magic of having a shared group identity without being in the same company?
Open source has very much rocked our ideas of, how we structure businesses and projects. Community is being recognized as being really integral to the long-term and health of companies.
Microsoft doesn't translate its software into languages that aren't profitable. And that just kind of blew my mind. It was like, wow, there are actually people out there that speak languages that just don't make enough money for Microsoft to care about building software for them. Okay, open source has a lot more interest to me now. There is such a need and a recognition, hey, as long as we have the basic rudimentary components, we can start assembling it for ourselves, and we can feed our own community, we can treat our own community, and we can make these things work for what makes sense to us.
Studio 54. In the 70s, this was the club that Andy Warhol kind of presided over. Lots of interesting people came by. There was a buzz that this is an interesting space. I think human beings make a cost-benefit analysis, and they say, is there interesting stuff going on? Then I'll join that. If there's not, the popular become more popular. And it doesn't have to be done in an elitist way. I don't believe in putting up a rope and having a bouncer. Having a speaker series, inviting interesting people, kind of creating that brew.
We all learn from each other and the events that happen in the space. We all benefit from a great deal and meet all sorts of interesting people, and we find it helps our business more than is seen as an extra expense.
It's like we wanted a space for us to be able to go to. We wanted to make it open and available for the community. We were working out of our dining room or out of a cafe. We didn't have an alternative. We couldn't go to any space that would just kind of welcome us in. It seemed really too bad. Because we can sometimes be interesting people, and so if we're around other interesting people, interesting things usually happen. That's the process that we like to call accelerating serendipity. We want to be able to get really interesting people together in a space and see what kind of chemical reactions can happen.
You grew up in Texas. We grew up in Texas, where it was like a desert. There was no community, there was no connection. I was like the only geek. So to have a co-working space there could be really powerful. What's cool is if you set up in Baltimore, the work they're doing in Philly, they get to converge and have community there and innovate from there and not be the only open source hacker I think that's probably where this is going to be the most effective.
There's actually really, really great things and really great people all over the world, and they're just sort of waiting to be discovered and waiting to find each other.
People live next door to each other and don't know that one another exists. Something like co-working and other community spaces like that, I think are really helpful for that sort of locally getting to know your neighbor and getting to know one another.
The best thing to do is really just to start talking about it. Talking about it to all your friends, pointing people at the wiki or at the blog or to the mailing list and getting them to see, look, there's a community doing this, they're real, they exist, you know, they're saying that it's possible to do this. I'm not sure, but I really like a space like this. So what can we do to actually make this happen?
Be very open with your process, be very sharing. The more you give, the more you're going to get in return.
So there are those people who kind of are willing to be the catalyst. You know, even if they have no idea, and in fact, we had no idea what we were doing. I mean, it was like we've ever run a space before? No. Like we'd ever put on an event before? No. I mean, it's not about knowing what you're doing. It's about being able to sort of see and model in your head where you're going to get to, what you want, and being willing and patient in your pursuance of it.